Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Harper, and I'm a nonprofit management fellow with the Women's Public Leadership Network, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, organizing, and inspiring women to seek office and become effective leaders. I'm so excited to welcome everyone back to a new leadership spotlight. With me today is Dean Marianne Wanamaker of the Baker School of Public Policy and Public Affairs here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. It's not every day you get to interview the dean of the school where you go. So thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to do this.
Absolutely.
So remember, viewers, if you have any questions for her, just drop those in the comments below. Dean Wanamaker is an economist by trade with a diverse resume spanning both academia and politics. So she's qualified to give a wide range of career and leadership advice, I would say. So to start, why don't you give viewers an overview of your educational background and career thus far?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I'm from the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. So graduated from a really small high school. Got lucky enough to go to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, which felt like a million miles away. Really wasn't. And then after I graduated from undergrad, I worked in consulting, management consulting in Boston for a couple of years. Then I decided I wanted to go back to grad school. So I have a PhD in economics from Northwestern University, and I came to UT immediately after I left Northwestern, and I've been here ever since, except for a year's leave to work in the White House in the first Trump administration. So I know we're going to talk about that.
Yes. Definitely relate from being the middle of nowhere and then coming somewhere. My middle of nowhere is only about 45 minutes away, though, so a little closer. But so to start, on this program, we explore how you got to the position that you're currently in and kind of the things that drive your leadership journey. As a dean, your position requires a lot of different skills to be successful. So what positions have you held that helped prepare you for this position?
Well, one thing I would say is that actually being from the middle of nowhere is really helpful. So a thing that was part of my childhood that it's not part of the childhood of my children is that I spent a lot of time in mixed age groups and diverse backgrounds. And not in a racial diversity sense, but more in a diversity of opinions and views and ages. And that's not as much a part of my kids' lives. It's also, I think, easier in bigger places to be segregated in socioeconomic terms. And that's not true in small towns.
Yeah.
So I think that was really helpful for just having a perspective on the world. I'll also tell you something I tell people all the time is that when I was in middle school, my parents would make us deliver poinsettias to my dad's patients in the nursing homes. And the rule was you had to stay in the room for 5 minutes. So you had to find something to talk to a 95-year-old about that took 5 minutes, right? And so, boy, we hated that. We thought that was like the worst thing that could ever happen to a kid. But it turns out that that is a really useful skill, right? Asking questions of a 95-year-old, right, is a skill. And listening to what they say and then be able to respond with a kind of a follow-up question to really get them engaged in a conversation. So I'm thankful for those experiences. And then professionally, 2 years in management consulting is kind of like a graduate degree. And so I appreciate what I learned in that space. And working in the White House there's nothing like it. It's just a crash course in all things politics and policy. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world.
Yeah, I definitely second what you say about the rural environment, because in me growing up, especially in the rural area, a lot of people are moving to rural Tennessee, so you're getting a lot of exposure to all sorts of different crowds that have decided to try the rural lifestyle. So I would agree, it's definitely given me a lot of perspective too. So throughout your career, you said you've taken a few different directions. At what point did you realize that public service was going to stay an element in your career?
Yeah, well, my mom worked she was a faculty member at a university in our small town growing up. So in a public university. So in a sense, she was a public servant, but I didn't ever really think about it that way. And then when I came to UT, I realized that every single day there was some question or some issue that came up where the way to think about it was, what's the right thing for the people of Tennessee? And it dawned on me after I had come to the University of Tennessee that, oh my gosh, you're a public servant. And so I really have leaned into that. And working in the federal government for a year, of course, doubles down on that. And think it gives you good perspective coming back to a university about how important universities are for our progress as a country, and not to take your position for granted. We don't work for a private institution. That does require that we act differently. And so I really enjoy engaging staff and faculty in those conversations, because in many ways it's motivating to be part of an organization like that.
Yeah. Did you consider any other paths, and what did that kind of look like for you?
I was going to be an astronaut, a dentist, and an investment banker. Like
I was going to be a crime scene investigator is what I was going to be.
You would have been great. Yeah, lots of different things. I mean, ultimately what happened to me was that when I was a senior in undergrad, I was in a class that required me to write a 25-page economics thesis, and I loved every second. Right. And so then I told my parents I loved every second. And my mom, who had been in academia, was like, could you maybe please try the real world? Just first, try it and see what happens. So I was like, okay. So I did. I moved to Boston and tried it, and it was great. I'm so thankful for it, but it's not what I was meant to do. And so I said, I really just need to be back in the kind of research, writing, and teaching world, which is funny because that's not what I do now, but it's where I grew up. In the university, and I still think it's the greatest job ever.
Yeah. So now that you're in a leadership position, what skills do you think are non-negotiable for that?
Yeah. Well, I've learned the hard way, like transparency. Like, you won't get anywhere if you can't be really straightforward with people. Not about what did I eat for breakfast, right? But about why am I making this decision that impacts you? And you got to be transparent, not just after you made the decision, but also before you make the decision. Let people into the thought process. These are the things I'm weighing, just so they understand when you do make the decision, why you landed there. And then the other thing, so transparency, and then the other thing is you have to make decisions. You can't just let things spin. I'm actually a pretty slow decision maker, which may surprise everybody working in this building. I need things to marinate. I'm an intuitive decision maker. And so sometimes I really want things, I just want to think about it for a month, and you can't do that. So sometimes you end up pulling the trigger on a decision faster than you want to, but it's what your organization needs you to do, is give them clarity and then let them move forward.
So I know you mentioned your mother being in academia. Here, we're working to build a network of support for women leaders. Did any women, including your mother, help you on your journey, and what made them mentors to you?
Yeah, I haven't been in a workplace where there wasn't a woman leader that I looked up to. I didn't do a very good job of building relationships with people, but I did do a good job of observing. So I kind of study people more than I form a mentoring relationship. It's more about I'm going to watch how you do things, and then I'm going to do things similarly. And so I still benefit from some of that. So yeah, I think all the way through. And of course, as you know, the University of Tennessee has female leadership for the first time in its history.
Yes.
And that's been, I think, really inspiring for all of us. And again, it's more just kind of watching how Chancellor Plowman operates helps me figure out how I want to operate.
So why do you think mentorship and support is so important for women as they move through careers?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people approach that very differently. My strongest working relationships are with the people who report to me. And in many ways, they are my mentors. So I know that sounds really strange, but there's just almost nothing that comes across my desk that I don't process with the people who are closest to me in this organization. And there's very little that I vet with people outside the organization. That's probably not the way you're supposed to do that. Okay. But that is the way that I do it. And at the same time, I'm really careful that when someone reaches out to me and says hey, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, and Z, and I'd like your advice, I try really hard to respond to that with, I have all the time in the world, even though I do not have all the time in the world. I always want them to feel like, if you need 3 hours to process this, I'm here for you, even if we're not that close, right? Because I know other people do things differently, right? And they need that outside perspective, or they need somebody that they think they can look up to help them process something. So if that's students or people who work here or people that I know outside of the university, try to be as generous as I can possibly be with that time, because I know they're like my kids, if they were in that position, I would want somebody to give them all the time in the world.
Yeah, I'll say we definitely value the opportunities you give us. I know we've got Dean's office hours tomorrow. We value that opportunity to not only like network with you, but also really connect. So what challenges do you think exist for women who are entering careers in politically charged environments? I know academia is politically charged, the White House, obviously. What's kind of your take on that?
I think that we as a society, and actually I think your generation is better than mine, but I think as a society we've become really poor at understanding perspectives that aren't our own. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's really true. And I'm kind of back to the story about visiting older people in the nursing home.
Yeah.
Like, what did you learn? You learned to ask questions and really listen, and ask a follow-up question and really listen. And I don't think we do that very well. And so one of the skills that I think I bring to the table because of my background is I've lived in all the kinds of places. I've lived in farm country, I've lived in Boston, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in DC, I lived in Knoxville. That's every variety. And I'm friends with people who believe all sorts of things. Things that if you're on the left, you might think are crazy right. And if you're on the right, you might think are crazy left. And those relationships are really important to me. And so I think what the mistake that people make is coming into a workforce or an opportunity with their mind made up about what's right and what's wrong, and what the path that should be taken or the path that shouldn't be taken. And I've had moments in my own career where I've been real blind or dismissive of the way other people view things. And I learned the hard way that won't work. So I think to the extent that people can come into situations with intellectual humility and to really listen and be willing to change their minds, I think that's huge.
So in that, have you experienced any sort of noteworthy leadership challenges that you would like to share, and kind of what you learned from those situations and how it helped you grow as a leader? Loaded question.
Lots of leadership challenges. Yeah, I mean, I guess like just to kind of unpack a little bit the transition that I went through. So when you're I came to the University of Tennessee as a faculty member. Okay, when you're a faculty member, you're not in charge of anybody. No one reports to you, and you really don't report to anybody else. I mean, you do sort of, but not really. That's what I loved about this job, was so independent.
Mm-hmm.
You're not responsible for anybody else. No one's really responsible for you. So then I went to the White House, and they handed me a team, but it was a team of 22-year-olds, and like we were good, right? It was real clear who was in charge. Okay. So then when I came back to UT, I took a job, this role at what was the time the Baker Center. And then all of a sudden you have a set of staff and a set of faculty that are in an organization that really needs to transform itself. So it's not a sleepy department where everybody can just do what they want to do. We've got to kind of all get aligned around a vision and start executing against the vision. And we also hired about 35 people over the course of 2 years. So lots of change, but not a traditional workforce hierarchy. So I had to learn the skill of like win friends and influence people.
Yeah,
right. Right. Like all of a sudden now I need people to do what I need them to do. And I need them to be intrinsically motivated to do so.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge. So what I've learned is, as I said before, like transparency is so important. Like I'm telling you the decision I'm going to have to make, and I'm telling you things I'm weighing as I'm making it, and I'm asking for your input. And then on the back end, after I've made the decision, I'm going to be really transparent with you about why I made that decision, right? That takes a ton of time. I don't love spending time on stuff like that, but it is ultimately really important.
So one thing I think that you've kind of been getting at without saying it is a lot of flexibility. I've seen a lot of flexibility from your stories. So has there ever been a time where you have done what you're saying, you're being very decisive, you've pulled the trigger on something, and you've had to have the flexibility to walk that back? And how has that impacted the way people have seen you?
That's a really good question. I don't think anybody who's close to me would describe me as highly flexible.
Me either, but I've had to learn it. I've had to learn it for sure.
am having a hard time coming up with a specific example, but I will say that like I make mistakes every single day, and I make big mistakes once a week. And so what I've learned is like I used to make those mistakes by myself, and I needed to own them sort of by myself. So there was no transparency in how I made the decision. So then when it was clear it was a mistake, I would go back and say, well, this is a mistake. And I'd have to kind of start from the beginning about why I made the decision the way I did and why it was a mistake. And now I have done, I think, a much better job of pulling people into this decision-making process from the beginning. And I may still make a mistake, but the explanation is more limited because it's like, oh, I just need to explain the last step and not all of the steps that led to the mistake, if that makes sense. I think it gives people, they can give you a lot more grace when they've had more kind of ability to see the decision-making along the way.
Yeah, that's one of the things we kind of get at in our organization is when women, make mistakes or get put into high-profile positions or pursue leadership roles, we get kind of a different microscope, right? When men make mistakes, they can play it off sometimes. And as women, it's kind of like you have to be perfect all the time. So it's interesting to hear your take on how you walk that back in a way that allows people to give you grace.
I don't think I have to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, that's a great mindset.
I don't think this place expects that of me. I don't think my bosses expect that of me. I think they know I'm going to make mistakes. And I'll be honest with you, like once a year, I offer to my boss to resign. I say once a year, I say to him, you should replace me in this job if you think I'm not the right person. Right. And I just think it keeps us honest with each other. Right. And I'm not doing it because I want him to say once a year, no, you're the right person. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I recognize like I'm making a lot of mistakes. I'm doing a lot of things well, I'm making a lot of mistakes. And you should feel very comfortable saying to me, here's the good stuff. Here's the not good stuff. I need you to get rid of some of the not good stuff if you want to keep this job.
Yeah. Gives you an opportunity to really feel like you deserve it. Yeah. I think that's a great strategy. So for those looking to add public leadership to their professional lives, what factors do you think they should consider first?
I've shared this with grad students and undergrads and really anybody who will listen, that I think the greatest gift you can give yourself is a change in perspective. And I think that in order to be successful in public leadership, you need to have had a change of perspective somewhere along the way. It doesn't have to be a massive life event, but you need to have found yourself in someone else's shoes, at least temporarily, right? Because ultimately the role of in public leadership, you are trying to figure out what's the right path forward for people who don't share common goals, maybe not even common values, common senses of what government should and shouldn't do. And if you're only able to view things from a singular perspective or set of experiences, you're not going to do that very well. You're just not. I don't think it's actually related to age. I think there are lots of young people who have put themselves in positions of having a change in perspective, have seen things differently than the way they were raised or the way that they thought the world should be. And they've made themselves uncomfortable in some sense and come out of the other side of that feeling much better. So why I love college campuses, because there are these real low barrier ways to hop in and see if another way of viewing the world is interesting to you, right? So it could be a religious organization that you're like, I've always been curious about how they do things, and I'm just going to go be Catholic for an evening, just see what it's like, right? And what's the barrier to doing that? Like basically nothing, right? Or like I was raised Democrat, but I'm going to like hop in this college Republicans meeting and just see what it's like, right? And what's what impediment is there to doing that? When you get to be my age, if you decide you're a Republican, you're interested in what it's like to be a Democrat, it's real complicated at that point.
Yeah.
It's real easy when you're 20. So I love college campuses because they concentrate those experiences and those opportunities to engage in serious conversations from other perspectives and other ways of viewing. And I just think that's really valuable experience.
Yeah, I think that's very foundational to us here at the Baker School, right? We're always thinking like the other guy might be right? That's why we're here. And I'll definitely agree. I think there's something that kind of snaps into place in your brain the first time you look at a situation from the outside, but you put yourself in that person's shoes. I think it does change you. And I'll say I think I've experienced a little bit of that already, and I can't wait to do more, because being uncomfortable in small doses, I think, is so good for you long term.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So what are you looking to do in the next phase of your leadership journey?
I have no idea. I don't know. You're part of the university community here, so you know this Clifton strengths.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not really like a personality test kind of person, but this campus is really invested in Clifton strengths, and I will say like that. I think it has been useful for me to understand what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And so, not to bore the audience, but one of the way Clifton strengths works is there emerges kind of a top five things that sort of characterize who you are. And the one that really characterizes who I am is something called significance. What it basically means, if I had to boil it down, is that if somebody walked in this door and said, you can do this super significant thing, but we're not going to pay you any money, I would do it, right? It doesn't matter like whether I have time, whether I'm going to get compensated, whether I need to sell my firstborn child. Like if it's significant enough, I will do it. And it's the reason I went to the White House. I wasn't unhappy. I didn't need a new job, but the opportunity presented itself in a way that was like, you can make a difference. Like I can't pass that up. So I have no idea what I'll be doing 15 years from now. I don't have any intention of going anywhere. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 15 years. It could be sitting right here in this chair. Who knows? But it's hard for me to pass up opportunities to do things that matter. It's just it's in my DNA, I guess.
You talked a little bit about this earlier, but do you have any methods that you kind of use internally to look at your own expertise and identify things you really need to learn? Like, do you have good self-reflective strategies that you think could be applicable?
That's a great idea. I was talking the other day to Heath Schuler, who is former UT quarterback and used to be congressman from North Carolina. And he was saying that he's a consultant and he has a bunch of clients. And one of the things he does with his clients is something he calls a self-scout, which I'm sure is a football term.
Oh, right? Yeah, definitely.
And so they have like there's like a matrix, and here are all the things I'm evaluating myself on. I don't have that, but I will tell you, like, I get a ton of formal feedback through the university process about how I'm doing my job. So the staff here are surveyed about how I'm doing my job. The students are surveyed about how we collectively are doing our jobs. The faculty are surveyed about how I'm doing my job, right? So I get routine feedback, and I take those things really seriously. I know exactly what my weaknesses are because they show up in more than one place, right? And then my husband also tells me usually,
great,
this is driving me crazy, right? So it's like, oh, that's consistent with everything else I'm hearing. So I'm thankful for that feedback. I mean, it's uncomfortable to read it sometimes. Like the glowing stuff is great, and the stuff that it's like this is not going well, right? It's hard to read, but it's true.
How do you transform that feedback, whatever of it is negative or suggests you need improvement? How do you transform that into something actionable?
I try to summarize it in one word. Like, what's the thing that I need to work on? So the last couple of years, it's been transparency. Pure and simple, right? And so I'm not declaring victory over that, but it's gotten a lot better. And so I'm due to get another round of feedback in the next couple of weeks. And so I'll try to distill it into one thing and then work on the one thing. I'm not the kind of person who can have 5 goals at once. I need like one thing I'm working on. And so for 2 years, it's been transparency.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it'll be next year.
Well, see, I don't know if we have, we got one more. So if you could give one piece of advice generally to all of the women in our audience looking to put themselves out there to become leaders, what would it be?
Great question. I mean, I do like if I can have a 1A and 1B.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so 1B is get that change in perspective. Okay, just it's such a gift. But 1A is remember that whatever profession you choose, be good at that first and be a good female at that second. Okay, so I think sometimes people come into situations expecting their gender to matter when it doesn't, or expecting their gender to matter in a direction that it doesn't. So my own experience is coming to UT 16 years ago And I wouldn't say I expected for my gender to be a headwind, but I did have a 1-year-old and was planning to have another one, right? And so it's like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And the truth is that when I got here, I found the most supportive colleagues, despite the fact that there were almost no women in that department, the most supportive colleagues. And I found that they were really so excited to have a female faculty member that they would pretty much give me anything I wanted. They were like, we can't lose you, right? And I don't want to overemphasize that, but I very quickly learned, like, if I try to make gender an issue around here, it's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good for them. It's not going to be good for me. This is not going to play to my advantage. And I need to just sit back and be a really good economist who is going to need a couple of maternity leaves, right? And that 100% was the right answer. And then sometimes when I needed to process like the girl stuff, I could do that offline with friends from college, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I just need to tell you what happened at work today.
Yeah.
but not in the workplace,
Mhm.
right? And ultimately it was a non-issue, and it hasn't mattered since.
Yeah, I would say your perspective on this is very in line with what we do at WPLN, because one of the focuses of our organization is not kind of othering women from men, not focusing on the differences, but focusing on what perspectives women bring to the table, what gaps they fill in econ departments, right? And not focusing on differences per se, but focusing on what they can do to expand and make better an organization. And I think we find that elicits a more positive response from many people. So it's great to hear that feedback echoed from like the practitioner side, right, of being a woman out in the world. So I don't know if we have any audience questions coming in. Let's see. I don't know if we have any so far. Oh, here we go. So what are some surprising traits that you see in your most successful students?
Oh, that's a great question. Some of our most successful, I'm picking 3 of them and putting in my head right now. I think the thing that characterizes all 3 of them are they are relentless learners. Like, just they absorb information at a rapid speed, and not on Twitter. Okay, so
you got me there.
I know, I'm bad too, but like, they read books to learn about the world and to advance their understanding of the areas of policy that they're interested in, right? And for all 3 of them, that has led to really kind of outstanding professional success. There's really no substitute for that, right? Like, it's hard to beat in the labor market. It's hard to beat out somebody who outreads you.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes it difficult. So I do think that's a key to success.
Yeah, and I would say too, like, finding the joy in learning. I think in learning doesn't have to look like what you think it does. It doesn't have to be how many academic articles you can read. Learning can also be your shared experiences with people.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think prioritizing that is definitely, again, it's something we try to do with our professional development opportunities, but I think it's something that kind of falls to the back burner in people's minds sometimes.
Yeah.
So let's do one last call. Okay, yes. Do you have a top book or podcast recommendation for women interested in leadership? I know what you're going to say.
Oh, well.
You can do a shameless plug now.
Yeah,
it's going to be great.
We have our own podcast. You
Yeah,
might be
we
right. What do I think? I have had seasons of things that really spoke to me. So the Wall Street Journal for a while had like a women in business podcast that was all about like female CEOs in their own words. And there was a time period where like I was obsessed with that podcast. I don't listen to it anymore. I'm not even sure they produce it anymore. But there was a period where that was my answer. Right now, I am. I've also had my Brene Brown period. Okay,
oh, yeah.
So like
everyone has.
like everyone, like all your stages. Right now, I am. I'm listening to a lot of stuff about constitutional law, partially related to where we are as a country and what's going on. But some of the strongest voices in that world are women. And so I'm kind of loving listening to them. Women about my age, which I find to be kind of an interesting phenomenon. So
interesting, but great.
Yeah.
I think it's a great take on it, because when you traditionally think of con law, you think of old fellers in the law school. Like, but I would definitely be interested in hearing from some of the women in con law because I'm
Yeah.
interested in that myself. So I think that's going to be great. So I think we're all.
Before you do that, let me
Okay.
give one final
Yes.
plug, and I'm not going to be able to think of the name of this book right now, but years and years ago, I read a book about Katharine Graham, who was who built the Washington Post and made it hum in a time period where like women in news, in journalism was like, there's no way, right? And I found her story, and I wish I could think of the name of the book, but I found her story to be so inspiring. And my mom has read that book. My girls will eventually read that book. Like it just that pioneer story, even though, again, I feel like we should come to the workplace as the profession and the gender second. And I totally agree with that. Like just a story of how somebody navigated a place like that in a time period like that. It was so inspirational. And so anybody who's interested in a long read about these sorts of issues, I think that's a great one.
Yeah. And I think it's, finding kernels of things that apply to your story in these grand success stories, because, not everybody has to have a grand success story, but if you can pull things from it and really apply it to your own life, I think that is very, very useful.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the last things I have for you. Do you have any concluding words for our audience?
I don't, but I have a question for you.
Sure.
Like as you look out at the landscape of public service, like what are your thoughts about how women can contribute to our current situation?
Again, I think it's all about that diversity of perspectives, right? Because when you get women in all levels of public service, even from your street level bureaucrats, your police officers, those types of people, all the way into administrative roles, I think that having someone who's been in female positions their whole life, like a mother, I think mothers bring different perspectives to things. I think women with families, women with this ability to nurture, bring perspectives that may be lacking. Again, it's not bad that they've lacked before, but I think that bringing that to the table can have kind of a calming effect on things, especially when we're able to be loud enough to be heard. I think it's you have to walk that line, right? But I think it's I think looking out, that's something that I'm excited to bring into my future in public service.
That. And then they'll be surprised when you also bring this like ruthless logic along with you.
Yes, right.
Right? They're like, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting that. That's the
you seem so nice. That's my favorite one. You seem so nice.
You seem so nice, and yet,
yeah, right. So thank you again for taking time out of your day to have this conversation. Absolutely. This has been so fun.
Great.
So to any viewers still with us, please feel free to reach out to hello@womenspublicleadership.net with any questions. And I would also encourage our viewers to check out our website, which is womenspublicleadership.net. We have a few exciting things going on right now. We have lots of merch for sale in our store. And of course, our annual summit tickets are still on sale. You guys can come join us June 5th through 7th in sunny Orlando, Florida for a fun weekend of leadership workshops. Also, make sure to check out our new monthly podcast that we are launching, Tips from the Trail. It is available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And for our college-age viewers who may want to do something like I'm doing right now, our fellowship applications are open until March 10th at 5 p.m. Pacific. This fellowship has been a great experience for me so far. It's allowed me to be in a lot of rooms with a lot of people, get a lot of experience, have fun little chats with my dean. It's great, and I would highly recommend it. So make sure you check out these opportunities and check out our website. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching.